Hey y'all, in this video lesson, we're going to be looking into the costs and advantages of home ownership. In this lesson, we're going to have a lot of terminology and vocabulary that we're going to have to familiarize ourselves with before we get into some of the numbers. So there's two types of loans we're going to talk about for home ownership, and those are fixed rate mortgages and adjustable rate mortgages or variable rate, depending. So what is a mortgage? You probably heard of a mortgage. A mortgage is a loan taken out for property, a house, or other real estate. And another name that you might hear for mortgage would be a deed of trust or security deed. Some other terms that we need to define before we get into it are, well, the first one is term. And term is the length of the loan. Down payment is a portion of the purchase price, purchase amount that you pay first, basically. We say is put down, but what that means is you have usually cash or, check that you put down on the loan before you start paying, and it minimizes what you have to finance. So the bigger the down payment, the better, because the less you finance, the less interest there is. And then the principal amount is the amount financed. So what you owe, basically. We could say borrowed here instead, if you're more comfortable with that. Next page, describe a fixed rate mortgage. So it is exactly how it sounds. You have a constant rate that, or you have a rate that stays constant throughout the entire term of the loan. And then an amortization, it's a long word, amortization schedule or repayment schedule shows a list of payments with the allotment that goes to the principal and the interest. We are going to do a couple lines of one of these by hand. This also can be done in Google Sheets or Excel with formulas, or online. If you search amortization schedule, there's some really good websites that will list this out for you, because it can be very tedious by hand. So before we get into that, let's talk about monthly mortgage payments. And we are going to use our TVM solver in our calculator to figure this out. So we've got a loan with an interest rate and a term. And so when you use your TVM solver, you are going to type in the number of months, so basically the number of payments on the loan, the interest rate, obviously, the present value, that's going to be the amount that's borrowed. The payment is what we're looking for. We're going to leave the future value 0, and then we're paying 12 times a year. So pull up your calculator, type in the amounts, and see what you get for your payment. For this one, on payment, you're gonna hit alpha enter or just solve, depending on what kind of calculator you have. I got $1,042.59 for a monthly payment. I want to give you a little life hack up here on N. Since it was given to us in years, you can convert it to months by doing 15 years times 12 months, hit enter, and then it just does it for you. So you don't have to get out of the TVM solver and multiply that. It's just right there. So the monthly payment on that loan would be $1,042.59. Now try the next one. Input your information and see what you get for your monthly payment. Okay, so we can see here when we input all of our information, we get $676.48. which is considerably lower than the previous loan. We have the same principal, the same interest rate, but double the term. And in the short term, the $676 payment seems a lot more reasonable, but we can look at an amortization schedule to figure out how much interest we're paying because of the longer loan and see over time which loan is better. So it depends on your situation, but you can kind of weigh your options here depending on what you can afford and see for yourself. Before we get into that, I'm going to show how to do an amortization schedule by hand, and then I can show you the online version. So we've got it's a breakdown from your interest payment and your principal. So when you get your bill, you're going to probably see just a couple lines of this, but you can project this over, a 15-year term or a 30-year term and see exactly how much interest is going to your lender. So it'll have, when you have your bill, it'll have how much of your payment went to interest and how much of your payment went to the principal. And so honestly, a little bit depressing, but so in this example, we already found the monthly payment, and this was $140,000, 4.1% interest, 15 years. We found the monthly payment to be $1,042.59. So I'm just going to put that right here for now. If you weren't given that, you would have to find it first, because we're trying to figure out how much of that monthly payment is going to interest and how much is going to principal. So we have to know it in order to know where it splits up. So I have the formulas up here as to what we're looking for. In your first payment, we're trying to figure out how much goes to interest. So you take what you owe, the monthly balance. I've said it wrong 3 times. What you owe, I had it right the first time. The mortgage balance, my goodness, which is $140,000. I'm gonna try to write this small. $140,000 times the interest rate, 0.041, times 1/12, because it's 1/12 of the year. It's the first payment, the first month. So we're going to multiply those out, and we get 140,000 times 0.041 times 1/12, and we got 478.33. So of our monthly payment, $478 of it went to interest. So now we need to figure out the remaining that went to principal. Our payment was $1,042.59. We're going to subtract out that interest amount, and we get $564.26. Now you can kind of see where that's depressing, where most of your payment went to interest, and that's kind of sad. Now your new balance is the remaining balance, $140,000, minus your principal. The principal is what is coming off of the loan. They keep the interest. So that doesn't go towards your payment, only the principal does, $564.26. And we get $139,435.74. And now we're going to repeat for the next step. So using the new mortgage balance times the percent times the 12th, figure that out, try it, pause it, try it, come back and check your work. Okay, we should have gotten, for the interest payment, 476.41, which means that the amount that goes to your principal is 566.18. Then we subtract the principal from the balance and we get $138,869.56. So you can see how this is a little bit tedious by hand. In Google Sheets or Excel, it's going to be a little bit easier because you can just type in your formulas and then repeat them over and over again. But by hand, it can get a lot, especially for 15 years. That's just 1 month. So, well, that's 2 months worth. So for 15 years, it's like, oh my goodness. Anyway, so it can be tedious, but I want you to see where these numbers are coming from, and I want you to see how the interest is affected by that. So we can see in the first month and the second month, there's a little bit less interest or a little bit less of the amount, seems like dollar amount that is going to interest, because as we pay more on the loan, the 4.1% interest is going to apply less dollars. So if you can do things like put in a bigger down payment or pay a little bit more than your monthly payment, just pay a little bit over so that more of your payment goes to principal, then you're going to knock down what you owe. And the faster you can knock down what you owe, the less interest you're going to pay. But that's an amortization schedule by hand. I do have a website here for one online. There's a bunch online and they're all mostly pretty trustworthy, but I just put one here, the website there. And then I went by annual schedule in the screenshot because when I did monthly schedule, it was like really long, really long, and it didn't fit on the page. So I went with a yearly schedule here, and you can see yearly what goes to interest and what goes to principal. And this is where I'm telling you again, where it can get a little bit depressing. You're putting all your hard work and effort into paying off this loan, and you see how much goes to interest, and you're like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so this is the amount of interest each year that goes towards your loan. And so I want you to quickly add up all of those interest amounts and see grand total how much interest you're paying on a $140,000 loan. Just do it, add it up, try it and see. Okay, so when I added all those numbers up, I got $47,000, 666 was $47,666.70 in interest. So on your $140,000 loan, you actually ended up paying make sure I got the right zeros. $187,666.70. So maybe the house or whatever you bought land was worth $140,000, but you actually paid $187,000. So that's the cost of buying a home. But now you have equity in a home that you can sell for hopefully higher than what you bought it for, and it works out. It works out. It feels yucky in the moment, but it works out. There's some mortgage calculators that you can use online. I think this was the same website as the amortization schedule. I'm pretty sure it was even the same page, but anyway, you can still go to that website I have at the top of this page, and you can kind of play with the numbers a little bit. And I want to encourage you to do this on your own. But I have some screenshots here comparing the two loans. So in the first loan, it was a 15-year loan. In the second one, it was a 30-year loan. And I want you to look at the difference in the interest amounts between the two loans. In the first loan, the total interest, which we found above to be true, was $47,666.71. I must have rounded incorrectly somewhere, but close enough. In the second loan, a 30-year loan, remember that monthly payment was much lower, and that seems so appealing to have a lower monthly payment because then more of your money can go to like other things, right? But let's look at the interest that we pay on a 30-year loan. $103,531 in interest on a $140,000 house. So that is not fun. That is not good. So if you have the option, if you're able to, now if the only way you can get into a home is to have those lower monthly payments, then maybe some of those payments you could pay double or a little bit more, when you start to have a better job or whatever, pay a little bit more down on those monthly payments and it'll be better. But like if you have the choice, if either one is okay and you can afford either monthly payment, I would definitely go with the 15-year loan because you pay so much less in interest and it's going to come out so much better for you in the end. So that's kind of fascinating to me. I hope it is for you too. And then I have some different scenarios down here. Same loan, higher interest rate. So even if you just compare the two 15-year loans, One has an interest rate of 4.1, the other one has 6.2. You can see the difference in the interest there. And then also with the 30-year 6.2, you actually end up paying more than the house in interest. So just, I encourage you, if you're ever going to go buy a house, just look up these calculators online and really analyze long-term what's going on. And you'll also notice here on these calculators that in the green little box, it has the monthly payment right there. So obviously we know how to calculate this by hand now, but if you're not wanting to do that in the future, these calculators are very reliable. You can see right here, this is the one we did by hand earlier. That's what we got when we calculated it by hand. So reliable, quick, good. I have that website linked in this on this page. So there is amortization. There's another kind of loan that I talked about at the very beginning of the lesson. It was called an adjustable rate or variable rate mortgage. Now, this is a little bit different, and depending on the economy, can be really good or really bad. So these loans generally start out at lower rates than fixed rate mortgages. And that's why they're appealing, because for 4 years, you start out with a much lower rate than a fixed rate. After the 4 years, your lender reassesses the economy and rates and all the things. I don't know that side of it. And your interest rate may climb a little bit. But when you started out so low, when it climbs, it's still probably a little bit less than a fixed rate. So that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is if you hit a time of extreme inflation, and at the end of your 4 years, your rate goes up considerably. That can be kind of scary. So it is a risk. It's definitely a risk, but usually long term, it ends up paying out in the end because of that such low interest rate in those first 4 years. When you start with that huge principal amount, you have a small interest rate on a very big principal amount, and you're paying less interest in those first 4 years. And that's, we saw in the previous pictures, that's where that's where the lenders are getting their money. And that's where we're getting hurt the most. So it can be good, just be careful with them. So with these, your interest rate and your monthly payment, which is based on your interest rate, can change when the rate adjusts. So for example, if you had a $150,000 loan that went from 5% at $805.23 to just 5.4%, that is not a big climb. It's going to raise your payment to $839.58. So again, that extra $34 is not that much, but if you don't have that budgeted in your, monthly budget, then you're scare you a little bit. But again, 5% and 5.4% are pretty low and not a huge climb. So it still ends up being pretty good in the end. Anyway, like I said, you pay less over time with these. So let's look at some additional costs of home ownership. Maybe some things that you are not aware of, or maybe you are aware of. Closing costs are a one-time cost at the finalizing of the purchase or the loan. And it's considerable. Usually, it's a lot. So make sure if you ever go buy a home, make sure you have enough for down payment and closing costs. And then some other fees, or sorry, the fees included with the closing costs are the loan origination fee, a broker loan fee, underwriting fees, title services, transfer taxes, sorry, I missed that one, title insurance, government recording charges, escrow deposit, and daily interest charged charge for 12 days. So those things that never really get talked about are definitely there. And then in addition to closing costs, you have an escrow account, which is an account for property taxes and homeowner insurance. Then there's some recurring costs of homeownership. And first-time homeowners often focus only on the down payment and qualifying for the loan, but oftentimes they don't realize that there's some other things that you regularly have to pay for that you may not have planned for. So those things are property taxes, homeowners insurance, and regular maintenance on the home. And there's some formulas for being able to figure out how much you can afford to take out for a loan for a home. But if you Google mortgage affordability calculator, then you can estimate exactly what you can afford there. It's reliable, good, so you can do that if you want to. And then buying versus renting. So I want to kind of talk about some differences and pros and cons between buying and renting a home. In this example, I have two different scenarios. In the first scenario, basically you're trying to choose between the two. In the first scenario, you are purchasing a $200,000 home with a 20% down payment, 30-year mortgage at 4.75% interest. Or you can rent a home for only $900 a month at a 3% increase per year on the rent. If you purchase the first home, the value of your home increases 3% per year. So your agent gives you the table below to compare. And what we're going to do is look at the costs of each scenario. We're going to total up the costs of each scenario and then figure out which one is the better deal. So I want you to look at these two scenarios, add them all up, and compare. Pause it, add them, come back and check it. Okay, so hopefully you got these totals, and I want to talk about the vast difference in these totals. In the buying scenario, you end up paying $193,942 over 20 years. In the renting scenario, you end up paying $409,249. So essentially in the renting scenario, you are paying someone else's mortgage. And then when you leave that home, you get your first month's rent back. So you don't get back any of the equity, is what they call it, in the home. You're just paying someone else's mortgage. You're building someone else's dream. Now, if you cannot handle the upkeep of owning a home, or you like the lifestyle where someone else comes in and takes care of your stuff for you, when things break, it's taken care of. When there's maintenance, someone comes in and fixes it. So if that's a lifestyle more suitable for you, then renting makes sense. But if you're looking into just the finance side of it and earning more money, making more money over time, then buying is definitely the best option. Anyway, that's all I have for this lesson. I hope that I was able to provide some insight for you as you go forward in life. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you have any questions about anything I've said, please ask me. I'd be happy to help, and I'll see you in the next one.